vintage moto lovers. Bill Wheeler here, Wheelhouse Garage, and welcome to episode 7 of A Bike and a Beer. This week we have this wonderful combination of Art Deco design, perfect patina, and raw American spirit. It's a 1934 Harley Davidson Model R, and the beer we're going to be drinking today is a Prohibition Ale. It's an amber ale by Speakeasy Ales and Lagers, and I'm a big fan of amber ale, so I'm sure I'll like this one. But the reason I chose this is because it's called Prohibition, and 1934 was the first year that the Prohibition was abolished. December 5th, 1933. So 34 was the first year you could drink. So let's crack it open and see what it's all about. Caramely, but also hoppy. That's a really nice beer. So in 1934, Harley Davidson had the R series, which was a 45 cubic inch or 750cc V-twin. They produced it from 1932 to 36. It replaced the D series and had stronger valves, more space between cylinders, larger flywheel, new crankcases. It actually had aluminum pistons for the first time, and a heavy-duty oil pump. The motor's a flathead, also known as a side valve, which basically means the valves are to the side of the piston, and they're open and closed by mechanisms that reside in the crankcase, rather than an overhead valve where the valve train operates directly above the piston. They came equipped with Linkert carburetors and total loss oiling systems. Now the Model R was a low compression 3-speed model, and you could get one for a whopping $280, which sounds cheap, but in 1934 America was right in the middle of the Great Depression, and most people couldn't afford that. They only made 450, and one of them actually went to the King of Cool himself, Mr. Steve McQueen, eventually. Clark Gable also had an RL, which was the high compression version of this. And they did also make an RLD, which was the hot rod race bike for all those crazy racers in the 30s. Now, like most bikes that are 90 years old and survived from this era, the bikes had a couple of personal choices that were done to it that weren't necessarily factory. This is the correct Art Deco logo from that era. The color, I believe, is from the following year, actually. It's called Cameo Cream. This black paint here on the top of the fenders and this red pinstriping is also a personal choice, which I think is pretty darn cool. The Art Deco design is very apparent in the lighting on these. Now in 1934 they actually introduced an upswept pipe, but I actually much prefer this Burgess style fishtail. It's got an I-beam style fork, 18-inch rims front and rear with drums, of course. These beautifully aging Goodyear tires. These amazing cylinder heads have an appearance that only comes with age. When I started working on this bike, the oil prime it wouldn't build any pressure, so I thought the gasket was bad. I ended up pulling it out, and it was 2 pennies from the 50s sandwiching a piece of leather. And I just loved it so much that I ended up just cutting a new piece of leather and putting it back. And it's been working great. Now, I really wanted to do a riding sequence for this bike, but it's going to need a little bit more work. I was able to revive the motor from its long slumber, but the transmission is just going to need a little bit more attention. And I'll be sure to follow up with a test ride video once it's ready to go. I have ridden a tank shifter before, and I can tell you it's very fun. It's also a real mental task. You've got obviously the hand shifting element. You have a foot clutch. Timing's controlled by the left throttle. Thankfully the throttle is on the right hand side, which is fairly normal by today's standards. But there's a lot going on. But I can tell you, once you get it down, it's extremely enjoyable to ride, and really takes you back in time. Alright, would you like to hear this thing run? Me too. Let's get it started. Now, this isn't just turn the key and fire it up. There's a lot going on to this process. The first thing you do is actually to drain the oil from the crankcase. Once it's been sitting for a while, you can bet that there's been some oil wet something in the bottom. So there's a cool mechanism for that, which you can actually push and hold. Of course, you've made sure that there's fuel in the tank and that there's oil in the tank as well, which, because it's a total loss oiling system, so you need to be checking that quite frequently. Then you're going to want to depress the prime for the oil. Turn the petcocks on. Keep the ignition off. Choke. Full throttle. Couple of kicks just to prime the carburetor. Retard the timing. Quarter throttle. And hope for the best. Whoop, that's what we want. Isn't that a beautiful sound? Alright folks, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of A Bike and a Beer, episode 7. We'll see you next week with a new bike and a new beer. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, bottoms up.